my drive out bush, as we say here in Australia, to do a little bit of work at one of our locations. I bought this digital video camera over the weekend, so I thought I'd give it a bit of a spin and maybe do a bit of a piece to the camera. The drive's about an hour long. I won't torture you with that, but I'll probably do 10 to 15 minutes maybe. I'm just going to go past this guy here, although I can't, double white lines. Okay, well, let's just see if I can put the camera down and talk to you properly. Hang on. Yeah, I did put some sticky rubber on the bottom of that. That's just give me an unofficial signal to go past him. Plenty of courteous truck drivers around. Thank you very much. Now where was I? Oh yeah. Now I have a nice clear road ahead. What I thought I might do was have a bit of a word about UFOs and aliens. Now I know a number of you have just hit escape or delete or return or whatever, and disappeared, but that's okay. There's quite a lot of people out there have a reasonable interest in this subject, and I've had an interest in it for many years, since I was a teenager in fact. And yeah, I know you'll find this hard to believe, but that was quite some time ago. The question we hear asked is, are we being visited by aliens? Are some of these UFOs that are spotted really alien spacecraft? I think there's a very high percentage, probably 99% of what you see and read about this sort of thing is absolute twaddle. But I think that there's just a little bit, maybe 1 or 2% that is very interesting. I've spoken to a couple of ex-commercial pilots who wouldn't go into detail, but they tell me that they think there's something to it. And I've done a little bit of research, a bit of field research. I've done quite a lot of reading, seen a few documentaries, and I think personally that I would agree with them. I think there is something to it. I think some of these weird things that are seen and recorded, seen on radar, tracked on radar, are probably extraterrestrial vehicles. Balderdash and hogwash, I hear you cry. Well, maybe, maybe not. There was probably 2 or 3 very interesting documentaries about this sort of thing. One of them, there was a Belgian Air Force general, and he was holding a press conference. There was quite a lot of UFO activity in Belgium in 1989, I think it was. And in that press conference, one of the questions he was asked was, could this be a mass hallucination or some kind of natural phenomenon? And he said, well, hallucinations don't show up on radar. They've been extensively tracked. They scrambled fighter planes. The fighter planes couldn't get anywhere near them. Heck, there's cameras moving around. There we go. I'm going to have to get some better sticky rubber. This is very shiny, the dashboard in this car. This is the problem. Where was I? Oh yeah. Anyway, the general, I thought he spoke about it, you know, the impression I got was that he was being very honest. And he said he didn't know what it was, but, you know, that's the nature of UFOs. They're unidentified flying objects. Some of the performance characteristics of these unidentified flying objects suggested that they probably were, if indeed they were vehicles, they wouldn't have been built on this planet. There was another one, I think it was called I Know What I Saw. And there was a guy on there, an air traffic controller. It's a fairly famous UFO case. JAL 747 was buzzed by a UFO over Alaska, I think it was. Anchorage, maybe. And the air traffic controller involved, this was where the pilot called up and he could see this object, and he called air traffic control and said, was there any traffic in the area? And they said no. Was there any military traffic in the area? And they said no. Any traffic? No. When they looked at the radar, there was an echo from something that wasn't transponding. So it was a primary target echo, I believe they call it, or primary radar echo, something like that. And this thing moved around the 747. Anyway, this guy had all the printouts of the radar track. Now, you know, unless he's sat in the garden shed with a pencil and done this just as some kind of deliberate hoax, that's fairly interesting stuff. I think the guy looked pretty sincere to me, and I think chances are that the story he related is a true and accurate one. And I think the fighter pilot, the 1976 fighter pilot, I think he's a general now, that fellow, or retired general, when he encountered a UFO over Tehran in 1976, I think it was. I think that's a pretty convincing story as well. So there is some very interesting stuff out there. On the big black boomerang over Arizona, I think it was, in the early 90s. An awful lot of people saw this thing and described the same thing. Again, another very interesting, curious story. The alien abduction stories, when I read quite an interesting book called Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. And the more I read, the more I became convinced that there was nothing whatsoever to it. I read some of the stuff by Bud Hopkins as well. And I think both John Mack and Bud Hopkins were fairly convinced that, I could be wrong here, fairly convinced there was something to it because of the similarities between some of the stories. And some of the images that were drawn were very, very similar. Now, he wouldn't publish, or they wouldn't publish these images or these stories, these particular stories, from if memory serves me well. But, so it was difficult for me to sort of look at them and form an opinion as to what may have caused this. I mean, perhaps there's a particularly popular science fiction film that would have the same images. It's one of those things, unless you've got all the information, it's very difficult to pick it. But if you assume that some of these UFOs are real alien spacecraft, then you have to wonder, what are they doing here? Well, they could be surveying the planet. It would be prudent of a technologically advanced species, or species, however many species there are that are capable of travelling around the galaxy on a willy-nilly basis. It would probably be prudent of them to keep an eye on us, see how we're going technologically, see how likely it is, how long it's going to be before they're likely to get a visit from us. And if we are going to venture out into space, what are we going to be taking out there with us? You know, are we going to go out there as peaceful explorers, that sort of thing? And it may very well be that Roddenberry had it right with Star Trek. That they come, they have a look around, they survey, they take samples of things, and we're not worthy of contact unless and until we are capable of interstellar travel ourselves. I think that's quite likely. Again, it's just my opinion, but you know, I'm driving. It's a beautiful day for driving out in the countryside. Believe it or not, I get paid for doing this. I just bought a digital video camera, so I thought I'd talk to it. If this looks any good, I'll stick it on YouTube. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the So chances are, at the moment, at our present level of technological development, we're not worthy of contact, I would suggest. I saw a documentary. There was two documentaries that I saw over the last 2 years. One was rather disappointing. It was a program called Big Ideas, and it's on the ABC over here. And there was three impeccably qualified astrophysics PhDs talking about aliens and life, intelligent life in space. One of them, I think a question from the audience was, are extraterrestrials likely to be friendly or hostile? And they scoffed at the idea that any visiting extraterrestrials might be hostile. Someone said, well, Stephen Hawking said that there's probably a fairly good likelihood that they will be hostile. And they scoffed at this. Now, ridiculous. There's a species out there that's stuck behind a huge road train at the moment. So technologically advanced that they can fly around the galaxy. They are bound to have evolved beyond war, years ago, millennia ago probably. And I thought, I wouldn't be so sure about that. I think that's a pretty naive view, personally. I thought it would be nice to think that. And again, it may be that they haven't come and said hello because they don't want to get. In the past, they've been asked for technological information and all this sort of stuff. I mean, that's the first thing that they'd be asked, isn't it? How did you get here? What propulsion method did you use? Over what sort of distance is the first thing that they would be asked. So there would be nothing in it for them, really, to come and talk to us now. Nothing at all. If they came with hostile intent, they said, well, why would they? Why would they come here with hostile intent? There's water and minerals are abundant in the galaxy. They would be able to get them far closer to home than coming all the way to Earth. They wouldn't need to come here and steal them from us. And I thought at the time, hello, anyone home? They may actually want the planet itself. They may not want anything from the planet, they may want the planet. Because all of the exoplanets that we've discovered so far, there's hundreds of them I believe, even the Gliese planets, all of them are uninhabitable rocks. None of them are in the Goldilocks zone. They're either too near to the star, their parent star, or too far from their parent star. Or they don't rotate, or they don't have atmospheres, they don't have magnetic fields, or all of the above. Or water. It gets painful sitting behind these road trains. I'll just show you my view. There you go. That's what I'm looking at the moment. That's what I'm looking at the moment. And as you can see, oh, here we go. As you can see, it's a double white line, so it's hard to get past it. Now we've got a passing area, and now you can see how big these things are. And in a large four-wheel drive with a small diesel motor, not mentioning any names, there's not much power to overtake these things. Okay, let's put it back. Yeah, sorry about that. I just referred to the camera as him. That's something Australia. I've lived in Australia for a very long time. That's something Australians do. They assign a sex to inanimate objects. So you pick the camera up. I'll just pick him up and put him over there. Right, where was I? The aliens. So even if they are a peace-loving species, they may be put into a position where they have no choice but to take a planet from a less well-developed species so that they can in fact perpetuate their own species. If their planet and their colonies are full or coming to the end of their lives and they need a nice habitable planet, good temperature range, good magnetic field, good atmosphere, plenty of water, plenty of land mass. It's very windy today, it just blew me off the road there. And now I've come up behind another one of these huge bloody trucks. Hang on, here we go. See these things? Let's see if we can get around it. Here we go. And it may be that what they want to do is actually take the planet from us and move in. And there was a documentary, and I think it's very naive of these impeccably qualified people not to even consider that. There was another documentary that I saw the other day called When Aliens Attack, and I reckon it should have been called When Good Aliens Go Bad. It was that bad, it really was. It echoed themes from Independence Day, where we got involved in a shooting war with aliens. They arrive and they start shooting up buildings and shooting up cars and people and everything else, and I thought, ridiculous. Never happened. The chances of us getting involved in a shooting war with a visiting alien species, not a chance. If aliens wanted to take this planet from us, I think the way they would do it is biologically. They would have a bioweapon. They'd send a drone probably a few years before they actually wanted to move into the planet, spray some stuff into the atmosphere, and everyone would die. And maybe one or two other species that they didn't really want hanging around either, you know, mosquitoes for example. Any annoying things, flies. They might engineer the bioweapon to kill everything on the planet they didn't want. And then a few years later they turn up, and especially if their physiology is similar to ours, they'll be able to use the structures, everything's undamaged, power stations, water treatment plants, all that sort of stuff would shut down. It's designed to fail safe. Trains would just stop. They're designed to do that if the driver drops off the perch. So they would basically turn up to a nice shiny new planet with 2 or 3 billion years left in it, sweep up all the bones, have no nasty smells to deal with, and just move in. And at least until they got their technology up and running, they would fire up our power stations and water treatment plants and everything else, just to tide them over until they got themselves sorted out. I think that's how it would be done. And it would be so swift, no one would know what was happening, no one would be able to engineer an antidote, and the conquering species probably would have done this many times before. It occurred to me that in order to do this, to make sure they killed every single living person on the face of the planet, what they would have to do would be to probably get a fairly extensive, broad spectrum of DNA samples, human DNA samples. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. I mean, one would be they could just turn up and move into a cheap motel for a week or two. They're usually wall-to-wall DNA samples. Or they could abduct individuals from different races around the planet, because every race is going to have a slightly different genetic code. I believe that's how genetically targeted bioweapons operate, or are designed. Whether they operate that way or not, fortunately, I don't think we're in a position to know. So I thought, well, I always thought alien abductions, when I read these books, it's twaddle. It's just people with very vivid imaginations. But when I sat down and thought about it, and I thought about them saying, well, there are some of these stories that are very similar, and they describe the same things, or very similar things. I thought, well, perhaps some of these people really are being abducted by aliens. And I thought that may very well be the cause.